What is up, Motorfest racers? It is I, your wheelman, Alex Cornnut. I'll keep it brief. I make an error in this video. About a little ways in, we're calculating times, and I converted 2 minutes and 45 seconds to 185 seconds, and that's wrong. That would be 3 minutes and 5 seconds. In this case, it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds is 165 seconds. We draw a few conclusions and percentages from that. Overall, the rest of the data lines up pretty well, but let me just correct that error. Sidwaj just released a video on this exact topic. He hits the nail on the head. We dive a lot deeper into the information that he would have covered, and him and I have no idea that we were doing each other's video, so it's kind of perfect, actually. I love it. I don't want to witch hunt in my comments. I don't want name calling. If you can't be civil, you don't need to be there. It's that simple. Outside of that, buckle up, stay tuned. We've got a lot of info for you guys, and I think that once you really break it down and see what's really happening, this is it doesn't deserve the amount of controversy that this particular thing has become. Let's go. Today we have got a special video. I've got my man Exile with me today and Rhino the Raccoon. I've also conducted an interview with one of the top players in Motorfest, and we are going to do a deep dive into Wheelmod, what it is, what are the benefits behind it, what are some of the illusions that people have created in their heads on what they think it is versus what it really is, and put to rest a lot of the misinformation that is out there, because there is some really wrong info. And it's important to settle that because it's creating a bigger divide in the community than what we all agree needs to be there. And it's creating a stigmatism towards people that are using this, when in reality, it's more of a bridge the gap to where the top players are at using regular wheels than it is to be a hack that's just making everybody cracked. And so my co-hosts in this video today, Rhino the Raccoon, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Oh, man, we're out here. We're doing it. And then Exile, how you doing, bro?
Good, man. How are you?
We out here, dude. Both of these guys, I'm going to have their Twitch links down in the comments section or in the video description, and also YouTube channel for Rhino, so that way if you guys need some help on Summit, you know where to go, because the man is cracked. Does a good Summit every week, so that way you can figure out the lines and get it all going. So first and foremost, you guys, Wheelmod is not only just becoming a hot topic, but it's creating a toxicity in the crew community that is a little unnecessary. First and foremost, I guess let's talk about what Wheelmod actually is. I'll kind of give a bit of a description, and then you guys can bridge that gap on what I miss or maybe don't hit right on the head. Okay, how's that sound?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, so Wheelmod is a way to use software. There's a couple different pieces of software you can get for PC players. It is only PC players that are able to do this particular setup. And so by just setting that as a standard, the affected group of people that are actually dealing with this is actually a lot smaller than what somebody's wild sample size originally was. There's some conclusions drawn, but when you plug in a racing wheel like a Logitech or my Fanatec system behind me or whatever it might be to your PC or your console, the game registers that as a wheel, and it gives you one-to-one steering. One-to-one meaning that if you turn the wheel a half step, the wheels on the car do a half step. And so based on how you set up your wheel settings, if you have 900 degrees of rotation, you have to rotate your wheel, a full turn and a half to get it to turn left, and then a full turn and a half to turn right. Most people for racing games would never set up their wheel that way, because it's very, very hard to go from one turning angle to the other and be competitive in a arcade style game such as Motorfest. So most competitive wheel players are setting up their wheel for 180 degrees of rotation, meaning that if you're holding your wheel, if you do a 90 degree rotation to the left, that's full lock, meaning your wheels are fully locked this way. And if you do a full rotation to the right, or a 90 degree rotation, that would be full lock to the right. So within 180 degrees of swing, you're able to turn your wheels all the way from side to side. It gives a wheel player tremendous control over the car and allows them to control the car faster than what console players and normal controller players would be able to do. In a sense that when you grab your thumbstick on your controller and you hold it over, the wheels on the car turn, but they don't turn just instant. They turn at a pace. And it's a pace that's predetermined by the game's steering linearity. And even if you crank it all the way to the moon, there's no way to make the wheels just go like that. But a wheel player can go, and they can make it go all the way over. So by definition, if you're using a Logitech or any of these other wheel systems, you can set it up so you have faster turn-in response and more control in the process than any console player using a controller or PC player with a controller would ever be able to achieve. And this goes the same for people that are using a keyboard. If you hold down the key, it's just like you held the steering all the way over, and it takes a second for the wheels to turn. Does that sound reasonable, you guys? Is that a pretty good explanation?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what Wheelmod is a piece of software that tells the game, hey, this player is using a steering wheel, when in reality, we're using a controller. What that does is it allows us to take the thumbstick, hold it over, and the wheels turn on a 1-to-1 ratio immediately. So we can turn faster by using it. Not turn the car faster, but turn the wheels on the car to their full lock faster. So it allows you to have maybe a quicker turn in and a lot quicker snap steer the other direction should you get out of shape. It is, from my understanding, based on my interview with this other player, the way he explained it to me was, it is not better to use Wheelmod instead of a wheel. The reason that he was using Wheelmod was because it allowed him to then start to close the gap, not beat, not meet, but close the gap between the top players in the world that are using steering wheels and him be able to get closer to them with his controller. Rhino, Exile, what's your guys' take on that?
I would say, me personally, that's 1000% what it is. It closes the skill gap from wheel and controller players. Controller players have such a disadvantage when it comes down to that due to the lack of inputs and dead zone that they locked onto the controllers from day one. Like, wheels have that one-to-one steering, like you said, and so we have to use wheel mode to get that one-to-one steering to even compete with the best players in the world that are using wheel.
Okay, so basically the top players in the world are using their steering wheel because it gives them a mechanical advantage. Yes. And so this is helping close the gap between controller players to the wheel players, yes, without having to go and spend $150 or $200 on a wheel.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
which
correct.
That gets you a shitty wheel, like not even a good one.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So really, for all the people that think this is hacking, or think that this is some version of manipulating the game software, or making an ignorant statement along the lines of, "Oh, that's an aimbot," it's not. An aimbot in an FPS game is you literally have a piece of software that is running and it's proactively moving your aimer around to where all you have to do is click and you will get a headshot all the time. You don't have to aim. It's just going to do the work for you. Wheel mode doesn't do that. It just allows you to turn the wheels quicker. Thus, your lines are still need to be there. Your ability to put the car where you want it to be still needs to be there. Your draft, your boost management. I mean, everything else still applies. It's not like the car's on autopilot, right? What's your guys' thought on that? Is that...
Yes, that's completely accurate.
Okay. Like I say, I with this other interview, I was kind of already loaded for this one, but I definitely wanted to include everybody. How big of a difference does it make? Like,
it doesn't make a difference. Are you talking about like wheel to controller or top players?
Yeah, like no. So let's. Well, the top players on wheel have always been playing the game on wheel for the most part, right? Like, right. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they went from the Crew 2 to Motorfest, wheel to wheel. There was no, it's not like somebody woke up last week and they're like, oh, today I will use my wheel and become God. Like, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no.
Putting that aside, let's talk a controller player that goes from, you're good on a controller. This is where you're at. How much of an increase do you get on your lap times? Rhino, is there a track that you ran with controller and then maybe you ran with wheel mode afterwards? And you had an idea what the gap was? Or maybe somebody that you know personally that had done something? Because I have a number here from my interview, but I was just curious if you knew something off the top of your head. If not, I can use that as a reference.
Yeah, I actually do have a personal example as well.
Okay.
The Lamborghini Huracan Performante event.
Okay.
I had world record on a regular controller. I did, I believe it was a 245.
Okay.
And I went back and did it and got a 242. I got a few seconds faster after hours upon hundreds of hours of using wheel mode.
So we're talking like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
3 seconds over the course of 2 minutes and 45 seconds. So we're talking, what is it, 120? So 185 seconds roughly. And so out of 185 seconds, we're shaving off 3.
Yes.
That's nothing. That's not even. That's like 1.5%, like 2%.
Roughly.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking like a 2% margin there. That's a lot less than I think a lot of people understand about that, and that's a good reference. And what's funny is that lines up with some other data that I got from my other interview. I talked to this top player, and he said that originally his time on I don't want to give away the track because he had the world record on the track, but the world record was a 205, so which that is 125 seconds. Then it became a 203 after Wheelmod was introduced, which is 122 seconds. So that's a 3-second gap over 120 seconds. So that's roughly 2%.
Yeah.
It matches. That lines up exactly. So for those of you out there that think these Wheelmod users are just hacking the game and they're cheating, they're giving themselves this huge advantage, we're talking 2%. And that's 2% with perfect runs and no errors. And my experience, because I've used Wheelmod, I've tried it out, I've definitely given it a real hard look. I struggled with it because it was not easy. Would you say that it's easy to make mistakes while using Wheelmod?
Oh yes, 1000%. There's a really big margin for oversteering due to the small radius. So you just turn your controller to the left or right, and you can oversteer easily.
Okay, so oversteer. When I was using it, it was the counter steering. So I would be in a corner, and I would do what you say. I would oversteer. So my car would rotate too much for the corner, and then right. I would flick back the other way. And so instead of my wheels doing a nice linear progression, which is what a controller should be, that's what the developers have designed it for, I'm turned in this way, and then I need to go left. And so when I flick the tires left, they do this instead of going here, lock to lock. And I found myself doing reverse 360s mid-corner. It was pretty sick. So the margin for error, it becomes more of a knife edge, right? Like if you're using it to its fullest, it can be a boon to your racing. But if you do make an error and you need to correct, chances of it being a bigger error than normal it's definitely possible, right?
Oh yes, 1000%.
Okay, all right. Now I just did my own testing with this, and I'm curious what you guys think. Did anybody? The cars don't turn sharper with Wheelmod.
No, it does not.
They turn the exact same radius that they would normally. It just allows you to turn the wheels quicker. Right. So we've not increased the performance of any of the cars. We've just increased the interval in which we can steer the wheels.
Just a 1-to-1, there's no delay, anything. There's no dead zone. We just turn the wheels to where they go at the same exact time you turn your thumbsticks. Okay.
And so, just kind of to make sure that we're all on the same page, it's a 2% increase. Wheel players have the ultimate advantage. Would you guys say that the best input for the Crew Motorfest right now is using a wheel.
Yes, using a wheel, 1,000%.
Okay. That is what my interview with this other top player had said as well. And so that's pretty much universally recognized. It seems like everybody would agree with that, and that's good. Now, one thing that this top player was talking about, that for those of you that are out there on PC that are maybe curious about this, tap steering is a no-go with this particular use of the Wheelmod. Tap steering meaning like when you're in a controller, you turn like that by tapping the thumbstick. Because what happens is the wheels do that, and they flick, and it causes the car to be very uncontrollable. So if you use a tap steer method, you're not only going to struggle, but you're probably going to put yourself at a lesser competitive edge than what you currently have.
Right.
Because it's 1-to-1, you have to slowly move the thumbstick over into the corners, even slower than that, to try to get the most control over the wheels as possible.
Yes, due to the small radius that a thumbstick or a controller has.
Yeah, the very small swing of the controller. One thing, let me pull this back up here. I'm reading all my notes. The time to learn Wheelmod. This is something that I think is super, super important. We're talking it's a 2% advantage on a couple of different tracks that we had data for. Let's just say it was a 4% advantage because we want to double the metric that we actually have just to blow it out of proportion on the high side so there's no question on where we're coming from. 4% is not that much. It really, in the grand scheme of things, like it's a lot when you're shaving seconds, but really, if from a casual standpoint, that 4% is the very top end of it. These guys can go from 96 to 100, or let's just say they're at 93% and they're getting up to 97%. We're getting that 4% in there. And it's not, it's 2, but let's just say it's 4. Most casual players aren't even operating in the 90th percentile of their abilities or what the cars can do. Probably not even in the 80th percentile of what the cars and their abilities can do. Would you guys agree with that? That like the general community at large, majority of which that are upset about this fall into that category as opposed to the latter?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. And where I'm going with this is to get that 2% advantage or 4% advantage. The player that I was talking to said that he took over 20 hours from when he got it, and he tracked how long, like he knows how much he plays per night and where he ended up before he was actually faster than where he was at prior. And it took him over 20 hours of gameplay. For an average Joe, you and me that play 2-3 hours a night, and I'm talking to you guys at home watching, there might be some of you that play more than that, but there's a lot of us that don't, especially in a competitive format where you're actually trying to hone in times, not running grand races, but just running single player, learning the mod. 20 hours is 2 weeks of gaming. That's...
Hey, Alex.
Yo.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you and everything. I just want to add on to that point. Myself, when I got into wheel mode, it took me approximately 4 days to get to where I am now.
4 days?
It was not, 4 days. It was not easy. So going from a good controller player to taking my skills into wheel mode, it did not, it was hard to control the car.
Okay. So
it was not easy.
It's definitely, there's a skill gap there. There's a learning curve that is steep. You say 4 days. How many hours a day are you playing? Because you're kind of an exception to the rule. I'm a 2 to 3 hour a night guy. You're not. How many hours do you play?
I've been playing like 8 to 9 hours a day.
What the fuck? Okay.
Even when I'm streaming, you can still when I stream, you can still see where I'm like messing up with wheel mode. Like I'm still not sufficient with it yet.
Okay, so out of the gate, Exile's talking. It took him 30 hours to learn this, and that's being generous. It's more than that. But we'll scale down because we want to make the numbers such that we're overestimating on the stuff that is a performance factor and underestimating on other stuff. So that way, there's no way that our data is skewed in favor as opposed to wrong. Rhino, how many hours did it take you to learn?
For me to get good at wheel mode, I would say it roughly took me about 50 to 70 hours of playing 10 hours a day just to get used to wheel mode.
Whoa. Okay. So you're talking shit. Okay, so that's guys, 70 hours is a full-time job. That's 35-hour week. That's a work week. That's going to work every day, working a 7-hour shift with an hour lunch or half-hour lunch or whatever it is. I mean, that's a full-time job. So for the casual players, and I speak, if anybody that's watching this that is enraged by these wheel mode players, they're putting in more time than most of the rest of the community is going to work, let alone just playing the game casually. And that's for that 2 to 4% gain. And I would say for the majority of wheel mode players, because I have had, I'm privileged to talk to you guys and interview this other top player, I'm talking to the top 0.1%. That's where you guys fall. We prove it in Summit every week. Most people that are probably trying this out are probably not getting a 2% advantage over themselves because they're not putting in the kind of time to learn it. That would be my takeaway from this. What do you guys think?
1000%. It's not an easy thing just to grab. It takes so much time and effort, and if you're not already a good player, it wouldn't help you at all.
Oh,
You would have to have knowledge of the game and tracks and everything to have wheel mode useful for you.
that I'm glad you bring that point up because that is something that in my talk with this other player, my interview with him, basically the way it was presented like this: if I myself decided to go and play baseball tomorrow, guys, I don't play baseball. If I was to use sticky tack on my thumb or fingers or whatever to get more RPMs on the ball, baseball people that follow that, you know what I'm talking about, that would do me no good because I can't pitch. So for me to use sticky tack on my fingers to get a little bit more spins on my ball to make it harder to hit or whatever that would be, it doesn't matter because I'm not throwing at a speed that's even competitive. So another thing that he mentioned on that was like MMA fighters. A lot of these guys will juice during their camp, juice using steroids to get more gains, to get bigger, so that way they can hit harder, and then they'll taper off it before they get tested and whatnot. And it's essentially like an enhancement. It's performance enhancing. It's cheating. It's getting that edge, but they are not able to use that competitive advantage until they've spent thousands of hours on this side of things, training, learning jiu-jitsu, learning how to strike, learning how to fight, working out to get their bodies to a place where the steroids are actually going to help, learning to be a pitcher so you know how to throw the ball. I mean, you basically have to have all the other pieces before you even get to the point to where this becomes an advantage. So my takeaway so far is basically like we've got a group of individuals that are playing on controller that are trying to bridge the gap between controllers and wheel players. And the people that can do that with Wheelmod is such a small percentage because you've already got to be pretty cracked at the game to see the gains. Because otherwise, you might as well just learn your lines and be fast anyway, right? Like there's probably, for the general populace, wheel mode's not night and day difference. It's probably going to make people slower if they're not already really cracked. Does that seem right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Also, one thing I wanted to address was switching from controller to wheel mode. Sorry, I got my kids in the back. One thing, switching from controller to wheel mode is not gonna make you faster. Like, you gotta what I'm trying to say is like, you have to, like you said earlier, you gotta learn the game, you gotta learn the cars, you gotta learn the tracks. If you can't do that on controller, then wheel mode's not gonna help you better. You know what I mean? Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you've got to already pretty much be a top player for this type of modification or benefit or program, software, whatever it want to be. For those of these people out here that call it a cheat, it's an advantage, but it's not an advantage above all players. It's just bridging the gap to the wheel players. The wheel players are truly, they have the biggest advantage, and anybody can have that. They just have to go buy a wheel. And there's plenty of PC players that are not trying to buy a wheel, but this program's free, so why not close the gap? And from a competitive standpoint, I get it. I didn't want to learn manual transmission in Unbound when we were during that phase, but because pre-shift was such an incredible advantage over an automatic player on launch, it forced us all to learn because shifting with the bumper sucks. But whatever, we figured it out. So that's good to know. Guys, now I already have a number from my interview that I did with this other gentleman, but I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. Based on your experience in other Discords, in the crew Discord, in views on the video, we know how many people are downloading this from GitHub, from some of the links that have been hosted, because we know some of these guys. How many people do we think are actually using wheel mode actively? Like in Summit, out of the top 10,000 players in Platinum, how many do we think are using wheel mode?
No more than 100.
No more than 100.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good take. Like around there.
Exile, you agree with that?
Yeah, like around 100 players.
Wow.
Like
Okay.
there will be will mode players, but they're not. I wouldn't say pro or decent at it. They're still learning it. It takes time to even learn it to get decent at it.
Oh, okay.
But
So
majority of players that you see, I would say it's no more than 100 players.
okay. So and now I was talking all of Platinum. That's 10,000 players. We're thinking that really that we're only talking 100. Okay. Because when I interviewed with this guy, he said 60 to 75,
Right.
and I was like, that seems like a really low number. But if the data that he had kind of seemed to match that based on just the overall downloads of the software that was being used to make this all work. The amount of views on certain things to how that translates to clicks on other things. Like there's data for a lot of this, which I won't reveal any of it because I'm not going to reveal my sources. But at the end of the day, if they're saying that it's less than 100 and this guy's saying he's thinking 60 to 75, fuck. Let's just say it's 100 and then let's triple it so it's 300. That's 3%. So there's nobody in Summit every week that is probably even suffering from a wheel mode player existing. Because if they were, it's not like wheel mode is taking a player out of gold and putting them into platinum. It's not like there's people in the platinum ranks that are getting bumped down because there's people using wheel mode, because the people using wheel mode already have the skill set to be in platinum every week. Obviously, Rhino, you're one of them. You, on average, you get top 10 in Summit since TCM started. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and one thing I would like to say as well.
Yeah.
I would use myself as an example. You would see me top 5, top 10 Summit every week since Summit dropped. I got wheel mode and still getting top 3, the top 10 every Summit. The top players now are the same top players that were there before wheel mode. Nothing changes. So like it really doesn't affect the casual player trying to get into plat or grinding to get the rewards for Summit.
Okay. So overall, there's nobody getting bumped down 2,000 or 3,000 positions in Summit because there's all these wheel mode players. It's the players that are good that are using it. We're thinking the sample size is far less than 300. You guys are thinking a third of that, but I'm going to exaggerate the numbers just for easy to make it, even if we're wrong, we're blowing it up.
Right.
So it's not like you're going to be like, oh, I'm top 3, top 4,000, and now I'm top 7,000 all the time. All these wheel mode players. It's not that way. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, man, this seems like such an exaggerated issue when we start to look at the actual data on it. And I had no idea how small the sampling size was, but I took a poll in my crew, and I know how many guys play the game, and I know how many guys use wheel mode, and how many don't. And it's a very small number. A very small number. It's actually, for me, in my crew, it was less than 1%. But, we're out here. So it's unique to find that in the bigger communities and stuff, that's where we're getting. So essentially it's like, if somebody's getting gapped in a grand race, they were going to get gapped anyway. Like,
Exactly.
if someone's getting gapped in Summit by the top players, they were getting gapped before because you've been a top player the whole time.
Right.
Right.
That's correct.
And unless somebody's going to spend 20 hours on the really low end for somebody that's quite gifted at the game to 50 to 70 like you guys are to learn how to use Wheelmod, which most of us cannot, it's not even a benefit to them. And so it's not like they're coming up from gold and then just, ascending the ranks of platinum in Summit. And if we're talking times on a track that's 2 minutes and 45 seconds, we're talking 2 to 3 seconds at the most. If we talk a grand race, which is far harder to be super consistent in a grand race because there's so many more variables, and it's hard to practice for grand races because you don't see those routes as often. If the grand race is anywhere between 6 and 8 minutes, we're still probably talking maybe 2 to 4 seconds with Wheelmod on the generous end.
Oh yeah, 1000%. Like that's really what it comes down to. There's no like huge advantages. Wheelmod doesn't make your car faster. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't do any of that.
It doesn't make the car faster. It doesn't make it accelerate harder. It doesn't make the boost automatically just appear. All it does is allow you to turn the wheels as fast as a player that is using a wheel. Right. So essentially, it's like anybody who's blaming someone else, like, oh, they beat me because they're using wheel mode. Were you within 3 or 4 seconds? Because if you weren't winning anyway. So there's probably like just a small finite number of people that are getting second place to a player that's using wheel mode and getting first place, and they're close enough that they could have won otherwise. Because shit, I know Rhino, when I race with you, like I do good in the grand races. I've won plenty. But right. When I get in with you, but way before you were using wheel mode, I wasn't catching you. And so now that you have wheel mode, I'm still not catching you. Like nothing has changed. My day is the same. Like we're out here in third, whatever.
Like I said, it all comes down to having track knowledge, knowing what speed to take, what corners, learning nitrous management. It all comes down to learning the game and the physics of the game.
Okay.
And once you become good at that, let's say you're on PC, if you get a wheel or wheel mode, then that's when that actually does help you. But if you're just a casual player, a decent player, it will not. It will probably make you worse.
So we would say that wheel mode really isn't affecting very many people.
No, it is not.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's becoming a blown out topic. Like I thought this was a way bigger issue when I wanted to put this together and started doing the interviews and really trying to collect data. And now we're coming out the other side of it, and I'm like, holy fuck, we're literally talking about 200 people playing with a wheel mode. Like, why are you kidding me, dude? Like, we can go talk about the hackers in fucking Call of Duty. At least that's an actual problem. Like, this is silly. Wheel mode is a scapegoat for a skill issue.
I would say so, yes.
I think that might even have to be the title of the video at this point. Like,
yeah, I agree with that.
If you blame wheel mode for your loss, you're using that as a scapegoat for your inability to perform. Because I don't think that the wheel mode players, like, don't get me wrong, they have an advantage, but those same players are the ones that are waiting a minute before the race starts and still trying to get first. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm hearing here.
Yes, it's 1000% true.
And I did speak with this other top player, and the general consensus was that this is such a small issue that Ivory Tower is not only not addressing it, but they're not going to do anything about it.
Right. This was already an issue in the crew too, and they're not big on the competitive scene, so the likelihood of them even changing anything about it is super, super low. Like, nothing's going to change.
So Ivory Tower is not going to fix it?
No.
And honestly, the only fix they could have done is just give this to everybody. But I get why they didn't do it. I totally understand why they didn't do it. And guys at home, look at it from a developer perspective. If you're a developer and you have all these settings, and what do people do with settings? They go change shit. You could easily have somebody go in and change something in their settings and create a situation where they are having a very negative user experience. Because wheel mode is only good if you practice and you've got the understanding of how to use it. For everybody else, it's going to slow you down and it's not a net positive. So there could be people literally making the game harder for themselves and having a negative experience, meaning they might spend less time in the game, meaning they're going to spend less money on cosmetics overall. So they wouldn't just give you the keys to the kingdom out of the gate, because for the general populace, the settings are already too complex. That's why my settings videos got 50,000 views or 40,000 views or some number on it. Because there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I had no idea what steering linearity was. Like, whoa, I had no idea that that's how the dead zone worked. I mean, this is stuff that, to me, as a competitive player that's been playing on Wheel for a long time, it was second nature. But that's why those videos on my channel have done so well, because there's a lot of people that don't understand it. Well, the last thing that Ivory Tower needs is a bunch of people that don't necessarily understand how the settings work, having extra settings that are designed for Wheel players and being able to tweak it to get these values and then just throwing their car down the street. What do you guys think?
Yeah, like if they would have just, example, the crew 1 had wheel steering and clutch in the game already. If they would have just added this in the crew 2, and it probably would have just had transferred over to Motorfest, but they didn't, because they're not into the competitive scene. Like I said, they're into the new players. They want the new players to play the game.
Oh yeah, so they're not interested in us as a core community. The racers that are trying to get faster, that are pushing down the lap times, that are setting the world records, that are the top 0.1%. They're not interested in us, because we're going to play it anyway. They've already got their hours out of us.
Right.
They're after generating new players, bringing new people to the game, new cars, new vanities, new things to attract new players. And so why dedicate precious resources, which is money, to something that doesn't actually generate them revenue?
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. So that is, we've run along here. We're well into after 30 minutes, but I think that we've summed up a lot of things that, to me going in, I thought this was a more widespread issue. I thought it was a lot more people. And it's really not. And it sounds to me like there's an echo chamber of people that are claiming Wheelmod is why I lost, or that's not fair, but they're claiming that's not fair to the players that are on controllers, when in reality, if anybody was on a wheel, they wouldn't even blink an eye, and those people are actually faster and they have a more competitive advantage anyway. So, like, don't hate the players, hate the game. If we had the assessor, like, we had this ability for everybody, that would make this a non-issue, but that would ruin it for people that don't know how to set stuff up correctly, so thus creating a negative user experience. And really, my understanding is like, you guys aren't doing anything that are beyond the limits of the game. You're just giving yourself the same type of control that a wheel player would have, but it's more of a knife edge, thus being actually a disadvantage in the long run compared to a wheel. It's an advantage over controller, but a disadvantage compared to what a wheel player could do.
Right. Like, example, like, I would say the only thing that we have that we can do is we can flick. A wheel can as well if they have low sensitivity, or I would say high sensitivity.
Right. Yeah, like a shorter
But
throw.
for wheel mode players, we would, when turning, our front end tends to lock up while turning due to the low radius that we have. We have a very small radius to turn because of our controllers.
Meaning how far you can move the thumbstick from side to side.
Right.
Yes.
So we actually lose a lot of speed in turning. While in wheel, it doesn't. It has a higher radius. You can control your car way better. Don't lose any speed on corners. And so that's why wheel will always be the better option.
Okay. Well, I think that covers it, you guys. So to just sum up everything, case in point right here, it's a 2% advantage, but only 2% after you've put in between 20 and 50 hours.
Right.
It's not giving you a competitive edge above anyone else that's already playing the game. It's closing the gap to the wheel players that are on top and the controller players that sit here. And now the wheel mode players are falling into the middle.
Exactly.
Exactly.
most of the people that are complaining about this are probably
just-
getting gapped either way.
Yes,
Because the
they're
same
just-
people that are good with it are already good before. Otherwise, they're probably doing worse with wheel mode.
Like people who are skilled on controller, and then they get on wheel mode, they still have the same skill.
Right, yeah,
Like-
you have to have the
like-
skill first.
Exactly. Like Rhino said, wheel mode does not make you faster.
Got it. Well, that's it. That's the video, guys. That pretty much anybody who says they're losing to wheel mode is rolling the dice on them coming up against one of maybe the people that are using it, that are in the community very deep, that are the top players, are saying it's less than 100. If we blow that out, let's say 300. So let's say 300 out of 10,000 players in Platinum. Okay, 3%. That's nothing. And then if we go and then we extrapolate that and go, okay, there's all these different regions. There's all these different time slots for when these players play. And there's all these different grand races happening simultaneously. The chances of you as a player going up against someone else that is using Wheelmod, there's probably at the most out of the 28 people, maybe going to be one player, unless it's during a stream when there's a couple of guys that are playing. Like there might be some exceptions there. But for the most part, if you just queue up in a grand race, what would we say? Like maybe 1 out of 10, maybe 15 grand races you'll run up against a wheel mode player?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because like 10 grand races would be 280 players, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, shit, man. Like, this is... I feel like I myself have almost wasted my time researching all this to try to get the data. But I'm really glad that we did. I just feel like it's been blown out of proportion by so many people because they did not look into the numbers. They did not look into the community. They did not ask the people that are doing it. And if you guys go and you look on the crew Discord server, there are so many people that have got Wheelmod and they said it was way too tough and they got rid of Wheelmod. Like, that's a thing. That happens far more prevalent than somebody that's like, hey, I got Wheelmod and I got more cracked.
Oh yeah, wheel mode is not for everybody. Like I said, I have quite a few friends who try wheel mode and they said it was not for them, so they installed it. But they're still cracked on controller.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That sums it up, guys. That's we've really broke this down as far as we can. And it's going to be a long form video that very few people are going to watch all the way through, but at the end of the day, the information is still here, and to the best of my knowledge and to the best of my abilities and to the best of your guys' abilities, everything that has been presented here is accurate and is truthful because we're really trying to, uncork this thing so people can digest it and not be upset at this mythical wheel mod that that's why I'm losing. It's like, nah, that's not it. Okay.
Right.
That's it. I've got nothing more. I'm low key a little frustrated actually because it seems like there's an entire witch hunt out there amongst a lot of people and they don't understand it. If you think it's hacking, it's really not. I think that it's giving a controller player an advantage, but it's not giving them more of an advantage than a wheel player. And the wheel players are accepted by the community. They're designed by IVT to be able to compete. I could plug in my wheel behind me and play better than I do with my controller, but I don't because I'm too lazy. And anybody could, if they have a wheel, could do the same thing. So really, this is just kind of an equalizer. And the most competitive people are always looking for a way to get a little more of an edge on their current abilities.
Exactly.
All right, and I would like to state another thing. A lot of people who say it's cheating or it's not the same, the people who say, oh, I have a will, it's not the same, is because they're not performing at the top of the level and comparing themselves to the top players who are on the will.
Right.
Like, once you do that, then I would say you can say your opinion, but for the most part, it's not cheating at all.
Yeah, the people that are saying it's cheating are the people that are sitting in silver and gold every month in Summit And it's like, oh, that's cheating. Well, no, it appears that they're cheating because they're that much faster. And these guys are that much faster without it because we're really only talking about 3 or 4 seconds at the end of a grand race, and that's being generous. That's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. It's really not even worth talking about. All right. Well, guys, big shout out to my man Exile. Check him out on Twitch. His link is going to be down below. Shout out to Rhino the Raccoon. His links will be down below as well. If you do Summit every week, he always shows us how to do it the best. Like he said earlier, he's top 10 all the time, no matter what, wheel mode or not. I'm your wheelman, Alex Cornnut. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this sheds some light on the situation so that way people aren't recklessly attacking each other for using Wheelmod and accusing people when in reality you're winning the lottery if you make an accusation and they actually are using it. You guys have anything to add before we sign off?
No. I think everything has been said.
Yep, everything's been cleared out, man.
All right, man. Thank you guys. You have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
You too, bro.
Bye.